If you have your Bibles, we'll be over in Genesis 32. And as you're looking over there at Genesis 32, we're going to spend our time in this weekend series in looking at three particular people. I really do enjoy doing studies and looking at the people in the Bible because they are real people. Sometimes we read them and can put them on pedestals and miss the fact that they had a lot of the same struggles and the same fears and the same difficulties that we experience ourselves. And we're going to look this weekend at Jacob, Jeremiah, and Joseph, Lord willing. I didn't intend the J's. I just realized that tonight. I was putting it on like, oh, hey, they're all J's. How about that? But they certainly are people in the Scriptures who experienced an awful lot in their lives. And Jacob is perhaps one of the more fascinating people to think about in what he goes through in his life. I've done a whole series on Jacob by himself. We're not going to do all that tonight because what he goes through is certainly important and worth studying. But let me remind you a little bit of Jacob's background and where Jacob is before we come to chapter 32. Now, you may remember, if you've grown up in the pews, that Jacob has a twin brother, doesn't look the same twin brother, Esau. One's very hairy and one's not, as we know. And Esau's the hairy brother, and Jacob is not. And Jacob, if you remember, has caused a lot of difficulty with Esau. He has been able to get the birthright away from Esau because Esau comes in really hungry, and rather than being very brotherly and saying, oh, I know you're really hungry here, I just happen to have some stew here. Oh no, I'll give you stew if you trade away your part of the inheritance to me, and Esau does that. And then we remember that Jacob also steals the blessing away from Esau. For his Isaac, their poor father, is unable to see, is losing his sight. And so the way Jacob determines with his mother to steal that blessing is to go in there with the finely prepared meal that Esau would have done, and to go in with goat hair on your arms, and then that's going to cause poor dad to think that it's Esau rather than Jacob. And in stealing the blessing, remember that we are told in chapter 37 or chapter 27 that Esau, his essential last words to Jacob are, when the days of mourning of my father are over, I'm going to kill you. And Rebekah says, I can't bear to lose my son, and sends him away to Haran. And he's been up there working for Laban, and God has been blessing him there. And as you come to chapter 32, he hasn't seen his brother since those words were uttered. And in chapter 32, now God is having Jacob come back to the promised land. He's leaving his uncle Laban, and he's come with his flocks, and he's rich and has a lot at this point. And he needs to encounter Esau along the way. And I want you to notice where things are then with Esau in this and with Jacob. You'll notice in verses 3 and 4 of Genesis 32, we're told that what Jacob does is he gets his messengers and he's going to instruct them to kind of go ahead of him. And in verse 4, thus you shall say to my lord Esau, thus you shall, just says your servant Jacob, I have sojourned with Laban and stayed until now. And I want you to just notice the beginning of what the messengers are to say to Esau. My lord Esau, your servant Jacob, is how this all begins. That's not how things had been left before. And you're already getting a sense that Jacob is kind of nervous about this encounter by sending messengers ahead to meet Esau. And here's the words to say. My words are not, hey, brother. Oh, remember the good old day. Your servant, Jacob. There's already some concern. There's already some penance here in the messages that he's giving. And I want you to think about, what would you expect this interaction to be like when that was how it was left? That you swindled your brother out of the blessing and he wants to kill you and you haven't spoken since. I believe one thing that we're going to notice here is that it is clear that he doesn't think time heals all wounds. We sometimes have a saying about that, time just is going to make all things better. And I would probably argue, I don't know that time heals all wounds. I think time makes you not think about it as often until you remember the wound, and then you're like, oh yeah, I still have that. I still have the hurt, still have the pain. And Jacob seems to be aware of that here. Jacob seems to understand, I need to kind of smooth this out with my brother. And you'll notice that this is what he's going to do. You'll notice it says there that he sends these messengers on, tell him about how well he's done so that I can find favor in your sight. Verse 5. Verse 6, the messengers returned to Jacob saying, we came to your brother Esau and he's coming to meet you. And you might think, okay, well, this is going to be really exciting. This is really good news. Okay, my brothers are, but notice what it says. And it says there in verse 6, and there are 400 men with him. Eek. It doesn't sound like Esau's coming with a big hug. Oh, my long-lost brother who I haven't seen in more than 20 years. Friends, it's been more than 20 years at this point. Go tell them your servant Jacob, and the messengers come back. Yeah, we saw Esau, and guess what? He's coming with 400 men. It sounds like an army's coming, is what it sounds like. And that's how Jacob interprets this. You will notice verse 7. Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people who were with him and the flocks and the herds and the camels into two camps, thinking, if Esau comes to one camp and attacks it, then the other camp is left and will escape. So Esau's coming, 400 men. He thinks we're in trouble. Separate everybody into one camp over here, one camp over there, because if he comes and attacks, at least half of us will be able to get away and survive before this. Now, I don't know how all that showed up at once on the screen, but there you go. So number 2 on there. I want you to think about what your response is going to be when you have an enemy or an opposition or a difficulty in which it doesn't appear that there's any interest in reconciliation. You've probably had that. Here's a relationship that's fractured. Here's a problem that exists. And you're about to have this conversation. You're about to have this interaction. And you're pretty sure they're not in a happy situation about fixing this. You think they're coming for battle. What do? And I want you to notice the wisdom of Jacob here in verse 9. Because in verse 9 it says he prays there. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, the God of my father Isaac, O Lord, who said to me, return to your country and your kindred, that I may do you good. So first of all, God, you have been the God of my father and my grandfather. You told me to go back to the promised land, back to my family, back to my kindred. And you said in verse 9 that you're going to do me good. You made promises that you're going to take care of me, that this is the right thing for me to be doing at this moment to encounter my brother Esau. You can imagine Jacob probably thought he was going to try to avoid this whole problem. But you told me to do this. Verse 10, I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and all the faithfulness that you have shown your servant. For with only my staff I crossed this Jordan, and I have now become 2 camps. Notice he recounts all that God has done for him. I'm not worthy of the steadfast love that you have shown to me. In fact, he remembers where it all started. How much did he have, he says, when he went running for his life to Laban? He says, when I crossed the Jordan River, I had a stick. I had my staff with me, and that's it. And now I have returned, and I have so much. You have blessed me so much that I can even divide it out into 2 camps. So he's looking at this going, God, you've richly blessed me. Oh, how you've taken care of me for these 20 years that I've been away. Verse 11, please deliver me from the hand of my brother and from the hand of Esau, for I fear that he may come and attack me, the mothers of my children. But you said, I will surely do you good and make your offspring as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. So I love what God is doing here, or what Jacob's doing with God, saying, you said you would take care of me. You said you would provide. I see that you've cared for me in the past, and you've said you will do it for me again, and I'm depending upon you to do that now. And I do want you to think about how many times does God say that to his people? You can trust me. I'm going to take care of you. You don't need to be anxious. You don't need to worry. You just need to be strong in the strength of the Lord. I'm going to take care of you. You just need to believe in me. God says this to his people over and over and over again. And I want you to appreciate that Jacob is leaning into that right now. You said you've got me, because my brother's coming, and I'm pretty sure it's not going to go well. Now, I want you to notice what's given for us in this next picture. In verse 13, we're told there that he stays the night there, and he's getting himself ready for these gifts that he's going to give. And the immensity of the gifts that are described in verses 13 through 15 are absolutely amazing. You will notice the enormity of the gift is 200 female goats, 200 sheep, 20 rams, 30 camels with their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 30 donkeys. This huge gift Jacob is preparing to be able to give to Esau before they meet. And I want you to notice the reasoning that Jacob has in his mind to send this present. He says, I'm going to send my servants in waves. Verse 19, a second and a third, and say the same thing to Esau about my lord Esau and your servant Jacob. Verse 20, moreover, your servant Jacob is behind us. Now here's his thinking. For he thought, I may appease him with the present that goes ahead of me, and afterward I shall see his face, and perhaps he will accept me. So the army's coming, it looks like, and he makes you wonder, what's Esau's intent? Jacob prays, and Jacob prepares a gift. He's trying to give restitution. He's owning what he's done. My lord Esau, your servant Jacob, I want to bless you. Here's my gifts to you for what I've done. And I'm hoping that this is going to appease this situation. But Jacob is still afraid. Verse 22, he arises here in the night. He moves some of his family far, far away so that if that doesn't work and Esau is not appeased and he comes and he attacks him, at least his family's going to get away. And the most amazing thing happens. Notice it says there in verse 24, after moving the family away across the stream, that verse 23 says, verse 24 says, Jacob was left alone. Here we are in the middle of the night. And it says that a man wrestled with him until the break of day. Put yourself in Jacob's shoes. In the middle of the night, all of a sudden a guy jumps you and starts wrestling you. Who do you think is probably wrestling you at that moment, the moment that hits? I'm thinking Esau. I'm thinking he got here, he just blew through all those gifts and he's come for me. And they just start wrestling the whole night. I mean, can you imagine how exhausting that would be? Here they go all night, back and forth, wrestling. It was a strange event. Back and forth they wrestle and wrestle and wrestle and wrestle and wrestle through the night. And then notice as it's breaking day, we're told in verse 25, the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob. He touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint while wrestling with him. Okay, what are you going to do now? I'm crying uncle. Okay, I'm out. You just dislocated my hip. Okay, you win. Done. You know, I'm curling in the fetal position, grabbing my hip. I'm writhing in pain. Total dislocation here happens. And I want you to notice verse 26, he says, "Let me go, for the day is broken," and Jacob won't let him go. I'd be like, yeah, get out of here, buddy. Just leave me alone. Dislocated hip. We've wrestled all night. I've had enough. I'm not going to let you go. Just imagine, still wrestling. Back and forth they go. And he says there in verse 26, "I'm not going to let you go until you bless me." Jacob understands something about who he's wrestling now. I can imagine at the mere touch, somebody just touching your hip socket, and it goes out of joint, you realize, okay, this is more than human. I'm wrestling with something a little bit bigger than just some other guy here. Then I touch my hip, and boom, it goes out of socket. And remember, in those days, if you're asking for a blessing, the one you are asking the blessing from is your superior. And so he's understanding, okay, you're somebody greater. I'm not going to let you go until you give me a blessing. So notice what it says here in verse 27. He says, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." All right, freeze for a minute. Do you remember what his name means? So like literally heel catcher, but remember, that's kind of in a derogatory term. Remember after Jacob steals Esau's blessing, Esau says, "His name is right because he swindled me these 2 times. Heel catcher is like supplanting him. You're knocking him down. You're a swindler. You're a cheater. Jacob, here's the angel. What is your name? Swindler, cheater, Jacob. And notice he says in verse 28, your name is no longer heel catcher, swindler, cheater. Your name is Israel, because you have struggled with God and with people and prevailed. That has to be eye-opening. You have striven, wrestled, struggled with God and with people and prevailed. I think this is an amazing image that is given to us in this picture of wrestling with God. You have struggled with God and you have struggled with people and prevailed. And the idea of the struggle that Jacob has done in this moment represents really a summary of his life. If you think about Jacob's life, think about all the struggling that has happened. In fact, remember, before Jacob is born, do you remember what Rebekah's trying to figure out about this pregnancy that's going on? It feels like there's a war going on inside. What's happening, Lord? Oh, that's all right. Those two boys, they're two nations, and they're struggling with each other. I mean, before he's born, he's a picture of struggling. He is pictured of struggling with his brother for the birthright and for the blessing. He's pictured with struggling with his father. He lies to his father, friends. Remember, Isaac says, is that really you? You sound like Jacob, but you feel like Esau. Oh, yeah, it's me. He struggled with his father. He struggled with his uncle. Remember Uncle Laban? Laban has swindled him quite a few times, swaps the wrong woman when he's trying to get married, swindles him when it comes to the sheep and the animals. He's been swindling him like crazy, so he's been striving with Laban. And now, he's even struggled with God. But I want you to think about the wording that's given to us here. You have struggled with God and with people, and you've prevailed. You've won. Now, I want to ask a really important question right here. Why do you think Jacob won in his wrestling with God? Hosea is the prophecy that tells us that this is an angel. Why do you think Jacob won when wrestling with this angel, when wrestling with God? I had one brother tell me, boy, Jacob must have been really strong. He must have been quite a guy that was, because, I mean, man, he put a hurting on that guy. That guy took his hip out of socket and still wrestled him anyway and wouldn't let him go. I want you to think about for a minute that it wouldn't matter how strong you are if you're wrestling with God. I don't think your muscles are going to matter. I don't think that it was a problem of physical strength, that he was stronger with the angel, and if you just put them in an arm wrestling contest, he would have got him 9 out of 10 times. No. You want to know why Jacob won? Because God allowed him to. He wrestled an angel and was victorious. He struggled with God and prevailed because God let him win. If you're a parent, you might have enjoyed doing this. When my girls were real little, it seemed like any time I ever laid on the floor, I'd lay on my stomach there for some reason, and it was like the kids would come out of the woodwork to come jumping on Dad, right? It's like you lay down, here they come, and they come diving on you, and they're wrestling with you and jumping. And so what is your mandatory duty? Oh, they're so strong. Oh, you got me, oh, I can't get up, all that. Until you make them think that, then all of a sudden, what do? Whoa, and you get up and, kids are flying. And I let you think you were going to prevail. I let you win, but if I wanted to have you cast off, I could. Friends, if the angel wanted to win, he just touched his hip and put it out of socket. Jacob was struggling with God and prevailed because God was the reason for the victory. God was trying to show Jacob something really important in here, and trying to show him that he was going to overcome because God was with him, and that God was the reason that he had overcome in all of those circumstances. He had overcome with his brother, with his father, with his uncle, and even here with God, because God has been with him every step of the way through the struggle, through the difficulty, through the hardship. God had made it possible for him to succeed and for him to overcome. Friends, it is important that we remember such an important key point. We don't overcome because of us. We overcome because of God. We are where we are, and we have made it through what we have come through, and the struggles that we have had in this life, and the pains that we've had to work through to get us to this very moment is because God has brought us here to this very moment. That God has given us the strength that we need to get through the difficulty, to get through the trial, to get through the suffering. We overcome because God is ultimately with us. In fact, if you remember our context of what we're looking at here in the text, why do this right now? What's Jacob afraid of? Jacob's afraid of this interaction with Esau that's about to happen. What's God doing in the wrestling match? I've given you the victory before. I'm with you to overcome again. I've taken care of you when you were on the run. I was taking care of you when you were in Laban's house. I was taking care of you for all those 20 years. And now you're worried about this. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to provide for you. Friends, Jacob's life represents in so many ways the struggle that so many of us have ultimately with God and with life. And yet the picture that we see throughout the scriptures, and the picture that is so impressive that I believe is being highlighted for us in this text, is that in spite of all the hardships and in spite of the difficulties and in spite of the decisions that Jacob has made in his life, he won't let go of God. It is a beautiful picture. In all of the wrestling, there's one thing he's not going to do. I'm not going to let go of God. You can put my hip out of socket. I'm not going to let go until you bless me and say, I'm with you, you're with me, and we're going on. I'm not letting you go. Friends, how many people do you see in the scriptures who have to struggle with God like this? It's more often than I think we realize. We're going to talk about some of them this weekend. But Job had to struggle with God, didn't he? Oh, he's got a lot of questions. Why is this happening? What's going on? I don't understand. And my friend's advice is all wrong. That can't be right, but I don't know what's going on. I don't understand. You know, one of my favorites is Habakkuk. I love Habakkuk. You want a book on you don't understand what God is doing in your life, go read Habakkuk, because that's Habakkuk. Habakkuk says, Lord, I don't understand. God says, I know. Here's what I'm going to do. I know you see all this wickedness, all those problems. I'm going to raise up the Babylonians, and I'm going to destroy them, and that's going to be the answer. And Habakkuk goes, I don't understand. That doesn't make sense either. And God's answer is that my answer is something you're not going to understand, but you want to know what the big point of Habakkuk was that the Apostle Paul lands on? The righteous live by faith. What's God saying? You got to trust me. I know you don't understand. Trust me. I know you don't understand what's happening. Trust me. Habakkuk is struggling with God. Why do we love the Psalms so much? Because David is struggling with God. I mean, David flat out writes, where are you? What happened? Why aren't you with me? He's struggling with God. Peter struggles with God. Jesus is walking around saying, I'm going to be betrayed, arrested, and crucified. What's Peter say? No, you're not. He's struggling. Friends, we need to appreciate that God does not have a problem with us struggling as long as you don't let him go. There's a lot of wrestling we're going to do in life. And there's a lot of struggling that we're going to have, and we're going to say, I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand the trial. I don't understand what God is doing. I don't understand what's happening. And over again, you see people in the scriptures have those struggles. But here's the thing that sets them apart is they don't let go of God in the struggle. Their hope was that they would not let go of God, that was the thing they needed most in the difficulty. In fact, when you read in Revelation chapters 2 and 3 to the 7 churches of Asia, do you remember how all of those letters end? They all end, well, to those who have it easy, I'm going to give them the crown of life, right? No. To those who overcome, to those who conquer, to those who struggle and do not let go, the reward is going to be given. One more thing I want you to notice, because the text doesn't end right there. Verse 30. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered. He understands what this wrestling was about. I have wrestled with God. I have struggled with God. I have seen God face to face, and yet I have been delivered. But notice verse 31. And the sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. And therefore to this day the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh. What a message that is given to us is that here is Jacob, and the message that is being told to him is you don't need to struggle with God anymore. I'm proving to you that I am with you. I'm going to provide for you. I'm going to take care of you. But what I want you to notice, it is so amazing to me, is after the wrestling is done, the night is over, and the name change happens, and you have struggled with God, and you have struggled with people, and you have prevailed, is now as Jacob is going to continue his journey, he has got this dislocated hip that he is now walking with the rest of the way. And the limp becomes a reminder of the struggle and how God is with him. Friends, I have a question to ask you. How many times has God touched us, put us in a trial, given us suffering and hardship, and we've had to go through those enduring times so that we will remember to hold on to him for a blessing? How many times have we had to go through a difficulty and we have the scars to prove it, as we say? And those scars are there to remind us to not let go of God. How many trials do you have in your past? How many difficulties do you have? How much pain is back there that God was able to bring you through, in which God is reminding us to not let go? If you're like me, as it seems fascinating, generally speaking, as humans, we go through a very extreme trial. We go through something very painful, something very challenging, something that we don't understand. And we see God's blessing, we see him carrying us through, we see him helping us. And so then the next trial comes, and you know what my reaction often is? It's to forget that God helped me through the last one, and he can get me through the next one. I come into the next one and I forget how I was able to struggle through before, and God brought me to this place and he didn't leave me or forsake me. And I smash into this next trial and I immediately think, I'm all by myself and what am I going to do? The wrestling that God was doing with Jacob is to say, you've seen my hand for the last 20 years. Why do you think tomorrow is going to be any different? Why do you think this encounter with Esau is going to go any differently than how I've cared for you and carried you in the past? God is wrestling with us. And what God is trying to tell us over and over again is if you will not let go of him, he'll give you the strength you need. He'll allow you to be strong, and you'll be able to overcome. And I hope this colors why the Apostle Paul would say something that is so counterintuitive. But it's the whole idea of Scripture. You know when I'm strong is when God has had to remind me and cause me to wrestle and cause me to struggle and make me weak. When I'm weak, then I'm strong. The wrestling and the struggling, don't let that discourage you. Let that encourage you to hold on to God all the more, who's inviting the struggle. But don't let go of him when the struggle gets hard.